Norman, Emma, and Ray are three children living at the Gracefield orphanage ever since they were born. They're wondering about the world that is supposedly located outside the gated orphanage. 38 kids who live there wake up just as usual and start their day by having some breakfast that is prepared by their caretaker named Isabella, or Mom. Isabella manages all the children at the orphanage, and the children are supposed to be staying at the place either by the time they are 12 years old or get adopted by a family. The children go through a usual aptitude test and continue to have a fun time playing various games all day long. While the kids were playing, Emma runs into Norman at the low fence around the forest, where they wonder why no one among them runs away despite the fence being so low. One of the kids, whose name is Connie, gets adopted at the age of only 6 years old and promises all the other kids that she should write them letters when she finally gets into the outside world. The night arrives, and Isabella takes Connie's belongings off the orphanage before she takes her hand to guide her outside, where her supposedly new family is waiting for her. The rest of the kids give an emotional goodbye to Connie. Since she had left her favorite stuffed toy back at the house, Emma and Norman decide to take it to her while risking being scolded. The kids were happily on their way to meet Connie when they come across a random vehicle and are absolutely left terrified after finding Connie's dead body in the truck. The kids end up hiding underneath the truck as they had no other choice, and they overhear Isabella's conversation with a rich demon that reveals the truth behind the whole orphanage scene and how Isabella was basically trading the children raised in the orphanage as demon food. Emma and Norman somehow manage to escape back to the orphanage after finding out that the house is basically a farm for demon food. The kids get determined to get the rest of the children out with them, while luck did not seem to be quite on their side, as Isabella had found the stuffed toy back at the trade location that led her to believe that someone knows the truth. Emma undergoes a nightmare the next day at the house, and is later acting scared by looking at the cold and expressionless face Isabella is maintaining. Norman somehow calms her down, and the pair starts to wonder about how exactly are the children selected for the trade with the demons. Since the children can stay at the orphanage for a maximum of 12 years of time, the two determined that the merit of the human trade should be depending upon the IQ of the kids, as kids with bigger brains must be more tasteful for the demons to consume. With the logic behind the selection sorted out, the two determined that they have a time period of 2 months before Isabella nominates the next kid, who will be adopted. Emma and Norman head out to look for an escape plan and examine the area behind the low-level fence, only to run into a giant wall. The wall was quite flat, but to the luck of the kids, certainly climbable. While securing more info, our duo comes to know about how Isabella has tracking devices on all the kids, since that must be how she can tell exactly where the kids are upon looking at her little handheld prop. The tracker reveal makes the situation much harder to deal with. Back at the house, the duo was still planning things out for the next day, when Emma gets caught and questioned by Isabella with a straight face and a murderer's gaze. Norman almost loses it at a distance, but Emma somehow manages to maintain a poker face that helps her get off of Isabella's suspicion for the time being. One of the smartest kids alongside Norman and Emma, named Ray, is also seen around when Isabella was questioning Emma, and later when our duo was hiding under a tablecloth to get out of the orphanage by crossing the wall. They get approached by Ray, who questions them about their motives. The kids end up letting Ray in on their plan, and Norman somehow manages to convince him to join their cause of getting all the 37 children out to safety from this demon food farm. Our three little schemers return to the house to find out about a new infant that just got into the orphanage, and meet a new problem on their way of escaping in the form of a new caretaker at the house named Sister Krone, who very clearly looks like a danger to the trio and their cause. The kids keep investigating further to gather more intel and have a detailed conversation about how exactly would the tracking devices work and where exactly would they be hidden, since they're not really visible on something like their clothes. Norman sends Emma to have a look at the new infant named Carol, while Krone has a meeting with Isabella about her job. Isabella seems to not be interested in any small talk by Krone and arrogantly tells her to memorize the details of all the children present at the orphanage. Isabella remarks that she is aware of the children who might be the ones involved in the case of Connie, and later on, when Krone is in her own room, she reveals her mad side while revealing how jealous she is of both Isabella and her position at the house. Later after the meeting, Krone is outside playing with the children when she comes across Norman and Ray. She suspiciously asks them questions while clearly showing that she is on their trail. While all this was going on, Emma, who was with Carol, is trying to figure something out that might lead to the location of the tracker when some help from a girl named Gilda leads her to come across the fact that the chip must be hidden behind their ears. Emma discusses the matter with the other two, and the trio decides not to worry much about this for now and proceed to train the rest of the children by playing games and bringing their stamina up for the moment of need. When all the kids come back from the little endurance training, they get challenged by Krone, who plays a game of tag with them under a time crunch. Krone turns out to be inhuman in running and finds out the hideout of most of the children with pretty much no problem. With a little difficulty, she even ends up locating Emma, but the fact that she wasn't able to catch neither Norman nor Ray did not fit right with her, leading to her being even more wary of the conspirator trio. The kids are having another conversation about how things still do not seem to fit right. After all, there are no surveillance cameras at the house. The suspicion ends up leading both Emma and Norman into believing that there is a spy among the children, making things a lot more dangerous and complicated. Norman continues with his usual preparation for the big escape, and in the meantime, Isabella continues to make sure that Krone knows her place and is completely aware of the fact that the mother of the orphanage will always be Isabella, and Krone will be just a pawn. Krone leaves Isabella's room to later release her build-up frustration and anger in her own room, remarking that if Isabella is not around, no one will be able to stop her from being the mother of the house. Our trio decides to change the plan a little, since it would be quite hard for all the children to escape in a single large group. They end up forming teams and train the little kids to follow proper formation for the time of the big escape. Norman plays it smart to determine the one leaking information when he suddenly decides to change the plan of escape to only 10 days later, making the situation a little rushed. Since only the 3 of them would not be enough to lead all the teams, our trio decides to gamble and risk their plan by telling the secrets to 2 more children named Dawn and Gilda. Dawn takes the info as a prank initially, but Gilda's suspicion helps him in believing that their mom was the one who has been intentionally lowering the number of children at the house. Norman hadn't told Dawn and Gilda about the part where Connie had died, just to be safe, and later at night we see Gilda sneaking out of the room. Just as Norman was expecting, Isabella receives a note with the new intel on it, and Emma tries to eavesdrop on Gilda, who is stopped by Krone while hoping that she won't spill the beans. Even after a lot of pressure from Krone, Gilda somehow stood her ground and later gave Emma an embrace when she got back in the room. Norman gets onto his own work as he first questioned Emma, and later on, when he is alone with Ray in the room, reveals that he is aware of the fact that Ray was the spy who was leaking information to Isabella all along. Well, this escalated quickly. Norman explains a plan he had already set beforehand with the location of the ropes he was hiding around. He reveals that he had lied to Ray about the others knowing about the ropes, and since Ray was the only one who knew of the rope hidden underneath the bed, and by the process of elimination, he has to be the one who is spying for Mom. Ray ends up accepting the fact that he basically walked straight into the trap Norman had set, and remarks that he was working for Mom for quite a long time, with a scary look on his face. Ray proceeds to explain himself by claiming that he was being the lapdog of Mom just for the sake of the big escape day, since according to him, that was the best way to gather intel. He reveals some information about the transmitters as well, and decides to join Norman's team on his terms. After the long discussion with Norman, Ray moves to provide his daily report to Isabella, where he also reveals how he has been spying for her for the past 6 years. He claims that nothing really serious is going on, and tells Isabella to be wary of Sister Krone, since she might end up making a move for real. Norman and Ray are in the forest with Emma, where Ray clarifies that he was the one who was acting as a spy for Mom to Emma as well. Emma gets quite upset when, despite the refusal from Norman, Ray ends up telling her that they won't be able to save everyone from getting into the hands of the demons. Emma gets quite angry at the statement, and tells Ray to never pick and choose again, before she explains the possibility of a hidden place in Mom's room, where she contacts the headquarters from. Emma's thinking was based on the fact that the length of the plan does not add up, and this info ended up giving hope to Dawn and Gilda, as they didn't know anything about how Connie was already dead. In their desire to find out about the real Mom themselves, Dawn and Gilda took the risk of sneaking into Mom's room. They moved some bookshelves around to finally find the gate that should lead to the secret room Emma was talking about. Dawn and Gilda get a little scared as suddenly a child walks into Mom's room while the other three were looking for possibilities of escape or some sort of clues outside the building that might be helpful for them. Emma claims to take the other two to someone important while Dawn decides to take a really huge risk by stealing the key from Isabella's pocket with his pickpocketing skills. Emma shows how there are stamps on every single book that is written by William Minerva, and Dawn finally opens the secret door to somehow sneak in. The stamps in the library books seem to be all alike, but further investigation led Norman and Ray to pick up on the Morse codes written on them, leading our trio to believe that there must be someone outside the wall who was willing to help out with the whole situation. While our trio was getting their hopes up, Dawn and Gilda got absolutely terrified when they found the stuffed toys of the children that were sent to foster homes in Mom's secret room. They concluded that the children must be ending up dead and that Emma and company were lying to them all along. Dawn and Gilda somehow managed to escape the scene without making themselves too suspicious to Mom, and later meet up with the other three to have a chat. Ray asks the two why they took such a risk when there could have been surveillance cameras inside the room, but he is left speechless when Dawn claims to be aware of the whole truth. The total truth of both the human farm and the demons is revealed to Dawn and Gilda, which affects their mental state badly. Dawn rages out on the fact that the trio didn't accept them despite the fact that they are like family. The group reunites once again when Emma promises that they won't lie to each other about anything anymore, but Ray seems to be scared as someone seems to be having an eye on them. Norman is having a conversation with Emma about just how rash their plan is, before he moves on to gather some materials from Dawn and Gilda that he requested earlier for some sort of chemical experiment. Norman is explaining the plan up ahead when he reveals that they will be getting some time for preparations as Ray will be spreading false information to make sure that Mom wouldn't notice her navigator. Ray starts the work right away when he is in Isabella's room and gives her the daily report while claiming that Norman is looking to kill her. This throws Isabella off a little, and after Ray tells her to swap out the chemicals for fake ones, she reveals the new schedule of the child smuggling deal and that Ray will be the next one being chosen since he will be turning 12 soon. Back at the jungle, the group who was talking about the plan gets in some serious trouble now, as it turns out that Krone had literally heard everything they were talking about, and she even proceeds to try and make an alliance with the kids since they pretty much had the same enemy. Krone tells the kids that there is really no reason for them to not work together, and further explains how she was also a kid in this facility. Seeing the schemers still being in distrust, Krone explains how she really just wants to be the mother of the house and solidifies her words by showing a mark on her chest, claiming that if she leaves the premises assigned to her, the association behind all this named the Brass will electrocute her heart and kill her. Norman ends up reluctantly shaking hands with her with a lot of distrust on his face, and she offers the kids to visit her room late at night if they are interested. Our conspirators have a meeting about the matter where Norman remarks that Krone cannot do much without solid proof, as she hasn't enough authority as Isabella, and she's not allowed to just ship the kids out. The crew splits up after deciding to take the gamble, and the nighttime arrives, with Isabella receiving a parcel, whereas Emma and Norman visit Krone, who welcomes them with a scary look on her face. The kids waste no time in asking her about the organization she works for, and she answers all of the questions, revealing how the location navigator works, and how she is 26 years old and was raised in the same facility but in a different plant, hinting towards us about the fact that this orphanage is not the only human farm ran by Brass. Krone reveals to not be aware of how the outside world is, but is sure of the existence of humans outside. The meeting goes on the defensive as neither of the two parties tells the complete information to the others, which leads to the children trying to leave. Krone scares the two after revealing that she is aware of the fact that the kids knew about the transmitters all along, and she tells the kids to come again for another talk. Ray receives a camera from Isabella as the last reward, and decides to move the escape plan to the next 6 days, where he plans to set up the main distraction. Later in the bedroom, Norman remarks that he plans on pushing the schedule earlier for safety reasons, which seems to be troubling Ray, and meanwhile Krone, who is in her room, wonders about the reason why the kids were acting dumb. She decides to do a little raid of her own, and finds a piece of information planted by Ray that reveals their second biggest weakness of Isabella to her. Krone is initially overjoyed by the news, But her happiness wasn't long-lasting, as Isabella knocks on her door with the notice of Krone's transfer to Plant 4. The escape plan of our little conspirators gets a little more complicated as they try to sneak out, with Isabella starting to make her own moves as well, leading to the task becoming more difficult.